Hey, it's David and Ross back for the final week of our 4-part series.
Holy crap, I'm under contract.
This week, we're all about closing. It's the final week, signed, sealed, delivered. Everything this week is really about closing. So from a real estate side, from the transaction side, this week is your chance to take your final walkthrough. So we're gonna, about a day, 2 days out from closing, we're gonna go back to the house, look at anything that you want to measure or anything that needed to be completed for the inspection resolution.
What happens if you find something wrong? Like if there's a hole in a wall all of a sudden?
Well, then we're going to call the seller and the seller's agent and just make sure that they address it, right?
Okay.
So it happens, right? They've maybe moved out by this point.
Like
movers,
sofa hit
drop something.
Yeah.
So not to say it doesn't ever happen. So what we'll do is we'll call them, say, hey, I don't know if you noticed this, but XYZ took place or XYZ is marked up, and they'll say, yep, we'll get that taken care of.
Okay.
Definitely have had that happen, and it's typically very easy to resolve because, again, everyone is highly invested at this point. We're going to get to the closing table.
Yeah, because they've moved out, right?
Yep, exactly. So they don't want to move back in.
Yeah.
And so we're going to take that final walkthrough, see ourselves living there, and then really this week is about kind of turning it over to you, make sure all your stuff is good, reviewing final docs. We're going to secure our down payment money and make sure that's kind of ready to be sent or get the cashier's check, whatever the case may be.
Right.
But this week really is, with you, the closing disclosure. So if you want to talk a little bit about what they can expect on your end.
Yeah, so as I mentioned last week, most of the work is done, when we get to that end of the third week. It's possible that there could be, one or two other kind of minor items that we would be taking care of in the beginning of this week, but there shouldn't be. Usually we're pretty much wrapped up when you get about a week out from closing. There is one very crucial step left, though, in the mortgage process, a legal one, called the closing disclosure, commonly referred to as the CD, the closing disclosure. It shows you all the final numbers for your closing. And it's a document that's required to be given to you for review a minimum of 3 days prior to closing. Something that I'd like to point out is it's not necessarily the absolute final version. The whole point of the law and why they changed it years ago was to give you a certain period of time to review the numbers, to look them over. Maybe you see something that's not right, or you had a question. Or maybe the homeowners association doesn't have all of their final numbers in yet. Homeowners associations are notoriously slow, David, as you and I know. Right. Yeah, they always seem to get their stuff to us at the last minute. Well, we can't wait to the last minute to allow you time to look over all the numbers. So at a minimum of 3 business days prior to your closing, you will have to acknowledge receipt of the closing disclosure. We certainly hope that it's very accurate at that point, and honestly, over 90% of the time it is. That is the final number. But there are some situations, like with the HOAs, for example, where it might need a little tweaking. All of our numbers, all of the lenders' numbers will be accurate. It's usually something related to a third party, that may not quite be on there right yet. So you will get the closing disclosure. You'll have to acknowledge receipt of that at least 3 days ahead of time, and then we enter something commonly referred to as the cooling period. It's mandated under current law, where you have this 3-day period just to review all the numbers, ask more questions, talk to you about anything else. And then once we complete the cooling period, then we are legally allowed to close at that point.
Nice.
And then we go to the closing, where all of the final documents are signed. So that is where the final CD will be acknowledged and signed, and where everything then becomes legal. You're signing, a note that says that you are going to pay back the whole value of the loan over time. Yep. You're going to sign some legal instruments called the deed that gives you ownership of the property and secures our collateral for the loan. Yep. So, once we get to this last week, honestly, outside of the closing disclosure, there's usually not a lot to do on the loan side.
Which is the way you want it, right?
Exactly.
Let's be clear.
Yeah.
By the time you get to this week,
right.
We don't want hiccups. We don't want to be doing a lot of extra things to kind of finalize this transaction. We want it to be very relaxed, very exciting.
Yeah.
We don't want there to be a lot of other things taking place.
No, and usually if there is something, it's minor and something that you and I have seen 100 times before. It's pretty. I think we would agree that it's pretty rare that something major happens in the end. It's usually something that comes out of left field that no one saw happening. Yep. The customer loses his job, or or something like that. Usually, if it's stuff like this, it's routine. It's things that we've seen 100 times before.
Yep. So that brings us to the end of our 4-part series. Hopefully this information's been helpful and you have a better understanding of what it looks like to go from under contract to closing.
Yeah, and if you have any other questions or would like to speak to us, on the mortgage side of things, we don't charge anything to give you an opinion, to look at your pre-qualification, just let you know what you might qualify for, the different programs are available. Just reach out to us. I know the contact information will be available here. Also, if you just Google my name, Ross Barrett, at Guild Mortgaged, it will come up. I know it's one of the very first things that will come up in a search.
Likewise, if you have any questions about the housing market, what it takes to get in, where values are at, we're always around to be a resource to help you make the best decision for your housing needs. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll look forward to talking to you next time.